For more on this, we're joined by Dennis-Kenji Kipker in Frankfurt. He's the Research Director at Cyber Intelligence Institute. Welcome back to the programme, Dennis. Now, is this really about sharing the wealth from AI, or is it just Sam Altman buying political protection to bypass security reviews?
So I personally think it's generally both. And what's make it interesting, in my opinion, Altman has been floating this idea of sharing AI's upside with the public for well over a year now. So this fits a narrative he built deliberately, but the timing is also interesting and tells its own story. So the proposal lands just as Washington is leaning harder on AI companies over cybersecurity risk, and also the fact that Chinese open source models are closing this gap faster and more cheaply than expected to US companies. And handing the government equity is also a classic way to align incentives. So once officials have some kind of financial stake in your success, they have less appetite to regulate you aggressively. So this isn't, in my opinion, purely altruism. And it's also not purely a political sheet either. It's a bet that ownership buys goodwill of the US government.
And if Washington does become a major shareholder, would this accelerate the race for superintelligence, or would government bureaucracy slow down AI developments? And how could that change the way AI companies make further decisions?
So it could generally go either way, I guess, and probably just both at once. So on one hand, if the US government has skin in the game, there's a strong national security incentive to keep American labs ahead of Chinese competitors, as I mentioned, which argues for speed. But on the other hand, government stakes tend to come with more paperwork, more review boards, more people who need to sign off before model ships. And we have seen that, for example, regarding incentives of the US government regarding Intel and IBM. And it slows things also down. So what changes more than the pace, I think, is decision-making calculus inside these companies. So once a government is shareholder, questions like export controls, who gets access to the most capable models, and how aggressively to commercialize abroad stop being purely business calls. They become some kind of geopolitical questions. And that also reshapes the boardroom conversation as much as it reshapes the roadmap of these governments.
And could this actually discourage private investment in AI companies, especially ahead of future IPOs?
I guess it's a real risk. So investors generally don't love the idea of government sitting at the cap table because it raises these questions about governance, about whether decisions will start reflecting political priorities rather than stakeholder returns. And how about as a state gets treated in future IPO structure? So we saw some of that discomfort play out around the Intel investment. And that said, there's a counter argument as well. So government backstop can also read as a stability signal, especially for a company facing regulatory uncertainty. And it tells the market that Washington also has vested an interest in the company succeeding, not just regulating it into the ground. So which effect turns out here, or which effect wins, probably depends on how much control comes ahead to that 5%. So a passive financial stake is very different from a real seat at the table.
And we've already seen safety reviews delay latest models over cyber hacking fears. Do governments around the world actually have the technical expertise to judge what's safe and what's not?
Yeah, so this is honestly speaking the weak point in the whole conversation. So we just watched Anthropic's most advanced model get pulled over export controls concern and then restored after safety questions were addressed. So this isn't hypothetical, we have seen. It's already happening. And the uncomfortable truth is that a lot of the deepest technical expertise on how these models actually work does not sit in the government. It sits in the labs themselves. So that's slowly changing as specialized bodies build up in own capacity, for example, in Great Britain and Germany. But there's a real gap right now between the pace at which models are released and the pace at which regulators can meaningfully evaluate them. So government ownership doesn't automatically close that knowledge gap.
Dennis-Kenji Kipker, great to have your analysis. Thank you.